At 7:46 a.m. local time, August 13th, 2025, the bridge crew of the USS Higgins watches the radar screen light up. A new contact appears, closing from the west. The voice on the radio is sharp in Mandarin accented English. U.S. warship, you are in Chinese waters. Leave immediately. Out on the deck, the sea is calm. Scarborough Shoal, a ring of reefs barely breaking the surface, sits just beyond the horizon. For Washington, this is international water. For Beijing, it's sovereign territory, and the People's Liberation Army Navy is here to prove it. Minutes later, Chinese warships slide into view on the starboard side. Their wakes cut sharp lines in the blue water as they match speed with the American destroyer. From the Chinese perspective, they are monitoring, warning, and driving away an intruder. From the American perspective, this is a freedom of navigation operation, a legal transit to challenge China's sweeping maritime claims. It's the first reported time in 6 years a U.S. Navy destroyer has operated inside the waters of Scarborough Shoal. And today, every radio call and every maneuver is another move in a high-stakes game where no one wants to blink first. Scarborough Shoal is little more than a scatter of rocks and coral, but its position makes it one of the most contested spots in the South China Sea. Under international law, that places it well within Manila's exclusive economic zone. But Beijing claims it as part of its 9-dash line. That covers most of the area. Since 2012, Chinese Coast Guard and Navy vessels have maintained near constant presence here, blocking Filipino fishermen and building a web of patrol routes. For the Philippines, Scarborough is a national symbol and a vital fishing ground. For China, it's a strategic forward position to control shipping lanes and project naval power deeper into Southeast Asia. The reef's location is no accident. It sits close to one of the busiest maritime highways on Earth. Every year, trillions of dollars in trade pass within striking distance. Control over Scarborough isn't just about rocks and reefs, it's about sea control, surveillance, and leverage in any future conflict. That's the stage the USS Higgins sails into, and the reason every move here carries global weight. Within hours of the encounter, Beijing's official line is broadcast through state media. The U.S. Higgins, they say, entered China's territorial waters around Huangdao without permission. Huangdao is China's name for Scarborough Shoal. The statement from the PLA Southern Theater Command is clear. Chinese naval units monitored, warned, and drove away the American destroyer to protect sovereignty and stability in the South China Sea. That language, drove away, is no accident. It's designed to show strength at home and send a warning to other nations that might challenge Beijing's claims. In Washington, the response is just as firm. A U.S. Navy spokesperson confirms that the USS Higgins was operating in the South China Sea, but rejects any idea of any illegal action or forced withdrawal. The mission, they explain, was conducted in accordance with international law, specifically the right of innocent passage under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Freedom of navigation operations, or FONOPs, are a regular part of U.S. Navy strategy here. They're intended to challenge excessive maritime claims, not to provoke confrontation, though Beijing often treats them as exactly that. The result is a familiar pattern. Two powerful navies, each telling a different story, each refusing to back down. And without neutral footage or independent verification, the world is left with two versions of events, both loaded with political meaning. The USS Higgins, DDG-76, is an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, the workhorse of the U.S. Navy's surface fleet. At 155 meters long and displacing over 9,000 tons, it's packed with firepower. The heart of the ship is the Aegis combat system, a radar and missile control network capable of tracking hundreds of targets at once. Its Spy-1D phased array radar scans the air and sea around it continuously, detecting threats far beyond the horizon. Below deck, the Higgins carries a vertical launch system with SM-2 surface-to-air missiles for air defense, Tomahawk cruise missiles for long-range strikes, and ESSMs for close-in protection. Add to that Harpoon anti-ship missiles, 2 Phalanx CIWS Gatling guns that can spit out around 50 rounds a second, and advanced electronic warfare suites to jam enemy sensors. This is not a vessel that's easily intimidated. On the other side, you've got the People's Liberation Army Navy's Southern Theater Command, which uses a familiar playbook in the South China Sea: shadowing, warning, and escorting, we'll call it, foreign warships. Chinese surface combatants, often Type 052D destroyers or Type 054A frigates, are well armed with HHQ-9 surface-to-air missiles, YJ-18 anti-ship missiles, and their own phased array radars. The goal is to get close enough to signal resolve, sometimes within a few hundred meters, without crossing the line into open confrontation. In these encounters, tactics matter as much as firepower. The U.S. Navy trains for freedom of navigation transits to be deliberate but non-provocative. Steady speed, steady course, minimal radio chatter, and no visible preparations for combat. Chinese forces, by contrast, often use high-speed approaches, repeated radio hails, and tight parallel courses to apply pressure. In the confined waters of Scarborough Shoal, these tactics play out in close quarters. Every helm order and speed change is watched, logged, and analyzed by the other side. The aim isn't to fire the first shot, it's to force the other into a mistake, a turn, or a retreat that can be spun into a public relations win. At the heart of this standoff is a legal disagreement as much as a territorial one. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, coastal states have sovereignty over waters extending 12 nautical miles from their coastlines. Beyond that lies the Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ, where they control the resources but must allow free navigation. Scarborough Shoal lies about 120 nautical miles from the Philippines and well inside its EEZ. In 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague ruled that China's sweeping 9-line claim, which covers most of the South China Sea, including Scarborough, has no legal basis. The tribunal concluded that the shoal is not capable of sustaining human habitation, meaning it cannot generate its own EEZ. The United States is not party to UNCLOS, but it treats the convention's navigation rules as binding customary law. U.S. freedom of navigation operations are designed to challenge what it considers excessive maritime claims, like China's assertion of sovereignty over Scarborough's surrounding waters. China rejects the 2016 ruling outright and enforces its claims through constant patrols, exclusion of foreign fishing vessels, and rapid naval deployments when other states or their warships enter the area. For Beijing, the Higgins presence was a direct challenge to that control. For Washington, it was a lawful transit through international waters. The clash is less about who owns the reef and more about who sets the rules for one of the world's busiest maritime regions. One of the most striking facts about the August 13th encounter is how much remains uncertain. China's official statement claims that the USS Higgins was driven away from Scarborough Shoal after repeated warnings. But the PLA Navy has not released video, photographs, or detailed tracking data to prove it. On the US side, officials confirm the destroyer's presence in the area, but flatly rejects any suggestion that it altered course due to Chinese actions. They describe the transit as pre-planned and completed exactly as intended. Again, no imagery or independent logs have been released to the public. The absence of hard evidence is not unusual. Close encounters at sea are often recorded by both sides, but those recordings are rarely shared unless they serve a strategic narrative. In this case, each government's version supports its political goals. China wants to portray itself as firmly defending sovereignty, and the United States wants to show that it can operate freely in contested waters. We also don't know the exact proximity of the Chinese ships to the Higgins, the number of vessels involved, or whether there were any supporting aircraft overhead. Without those details, it's impossible to judge just how tense the situation actually became. What is clear is that both sides stuck to their scripts. No collisions, no weapons use, just two competing accounts of the same event, each crafted for maximum impact on domestic and international audiences. The Scarborough Shoal incident didn't happen in isolation. It unfolded against a backdrop of rising tensions across the Indo-Pacific. In the weeks leading up to August 13th, the South China Sea has been buzzing with activity. Chinese naval and Coast Guard vessels were conducting near-daily patrols, not just at Scarborough, but across the Spratly and Paracel Islands. Overhead, PLA Air Force sorties regularly crossed into air defense identification zones claimed by Taiwan and the Philippines. In early August, China held a large-scale live fire drill in the South China Sea, including missile launches and amphibious landing exercises. These were widely seen as a show of force aimed at both regional neighbors and the United States. Just days later, the Philippines and India conducted their first ever joint naval exercises in these waters, signaling that opposition to Beijing's claims is growing more coordinated. For Washington, the Higgins transit was part of a broader pattern, maintaining a steady operational presence to reassure allies and partners. For Beijing, it was another unwanted intrusion at a location it considers strategically vital. Scarborough Shoal sits just 300 kilometers from the Philippines' main island of Luzon, a key U.S. ally hosting American forces under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. From China's perspective, allowing an unchallenged U.S. warship here would set a dangerous precedent. Timing also mattered. The encounter came just 3 months after Manila renewed its security ties with Washington, granting expanded access to Philippine bases. It also followed an uptick in confrontations between Chinese and Philippine vessels at Scarborough, including water cannon incidents and aggressive blocking maneuvers. In such a climate, even a single destroyer's transit can spark headlines and serve as a litmus test for just how far each side is willing to push without tipping into a direct clash. By the time the USS Higgins cleared the waters around Scarborough Shoal, no shots had been fired and no ships had collided, and on the surface it was just another day in a disputed corner of the South China Sea. But the messages sent and received were far more significant. For China, the official narrative of driving away a U.S. warship reinforces its image as the dominant power in these waters. It signals to domestic audiences that Beijing is actively defending national sovereignty, and to foreign navies that operations inside China's claimed zones will be met with resistance. For the United States, the denial of any retreat is equally as important. Admitting to being turned away would undermine years of freedom of navigation operations and encourage further challenges to U.S. access in international waters. By framing the transit as lawful and uninterrupted, Washington reinforces its commitment to keep operating wherever international law allows. In an era when naval encounters can escalate in minutes, each incident like this becomes part of a running test. How close can two rival powers come without crossing the line? The answer for now is very close indeed. Midway through this standoff, one question hangs in the air. Was this a genuine warn-off, or simply a freedom of navigation operation playing out as planned? Without hard evidence, the answer depends on which flag you salute, but the implications go far beyond a single transit. Scarborough Shoal is just one flashpoint in a sea full of contested reefs, busy shipping lanes, and overlapping military patrols. The next close encounter could involve more ships, faster moves, and less room for error. So here's our question for you. Do you think that incidents like this make open conflict more likely, or are they just the cost of keeping strategic waters open? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Scarborough standoff, hit that like button and subscribe so you won't miss the next time these two superpowers cross wakes. And hey, if you want to go a step further and support this channel directly, join the fleet. You get loyalty badges, priority responses, and help us bring more true maritime stories to the surface. Click join on our channel page and get on board. Because out here in the world's most contested waters, it's not about who blinks first. It's about making sure you're still in the game when the other guy does. Fair winds and following seas. See you in the next one.